Welcome everybody to the Serpent Tarot for another pick a card. So today's pick a card is in the realm of the Arthurian legends. It's a particular set of legends that I am very drawn to and I've always loved since I was a child, reading the Once and Future King and so forth. It's a very resonant and powerful story, and one of the most resonant and powerful characters within the Arthurian legends was Merlin, and I just got this inspiration to channel Merlin, so to speak, to see what messages Merlin might have for you. And what came with that, the minute I hooked into the concept of that, whether it is channeling Merlin that did this or whatever, was to look at this as three elements of the Arthurian legend for you and how that's playing out in your story. So I'm looking for Merlin to talk to you about your power, your role, and your quest, and I'm seeing that as the sword, the sovereign, and the seeker. So that's what we're looking at today. See what Merlin has to say about that for you, see the magic and so forth. It's going to be a very magically oriented reading. I mean, I will talk about things that could be in the 3D world, but it's at that heightened level, so think about it at that level, and we'll be looking at your magical power, and we'll also be having a bit of a chat at a particular point with Morgan Le Fay to get the sort of divine feminine energy or magical energy along with the what you would call the divine masculine for Merlin. So hopefully that will be a fun journey for everybody, but also a deep one that tells you something about your true purpose, path, and power. So let's get into it. What I did was I chose 3 tarot decks, a different tarot deck for each one, that I feel has sort of imagery and a sort of sense that draws to sort of Avalon, that kind of feeling. And then I shuffled and I asked Spirit for the first major arcana card to be part of the first way that Merlin is bringing this message, and then we build from there. So you can, of course, go to more than one reading. It's always an option if you would like, and you can, of course, go to always the same number reading if you do that. You do you on all of that, but in case it will help, the first pile 1 has the Weird World Tarot with the Hermit card, and I thought it was sort of interesting, like Merlin himself I feel is coming really forward here because that looks like Merlin to me. So that's interesting. So pile number 1, the Hermit. Pile number 2, the Somnia Tarot with the Starr. And pile number 3, the Anvior Tarot, which I call the Green Tarot, with the World. So that will maybe give you a way to work out the reading or readings you want to go to, but whatever you do to do that, you do that. And when you know, the timestamps are in the description box below, and I'll see you there. Welcome, pile 1, to your reading. So you came to the reading, as I said, with the Hermit card that in this particular deck looks to me like Merlin as the Hermit, which is very interesting given these 3 cards. This is meant to represent, as I say, your power, your purpose, and your path, or the sword, the sovereign, and the seeker. When we have the Hermit over all of this, it's a deeply spiritual and probably very internal journey that we're talking about here. And I feel like it's your internal knowledge, power, and wisdom, or all of those things combined, that is showing the light, just as the Hermit here is carrying the lantern, as we would typically see in the Hermit card. I feel like this says, because of the sort of look of ancient energy, you're very closely aligned to someone like Merlin, like you have that kind of energy. In fact, what this is talking about is the path of the mystic. This is about that, because it's about the integration of the divine feminine and the divine masculine to then be able to do that. So it's interesting, as I say, in the structure of this, we will be getting Morgan Le Fay to get some energy and wisdom from her in terms of the divine feminine. But already when we look at the sword, if we think of the sword as being the sign of the power, the sign of the destiny, that kind of thing, you've got Igraine, which is another very strong feminine figure from the Arthurian legends, and in fact the mother of Arthur. So the divine feminine that brought that particular concept, idea, mythology into being. And this card is all about understanding your own beauty, your own feminine power, your own creativity, all of those sorts of things. And I just feel like we're looking at almost the two really powerful figures about the birth of the Arthurian legends. So I feel as though the marriage, it's not marriage in terms of getting married, but the combination of the divine masculine power mystic, which is Merlin. So Merlin is the mystic rather than the magician. That doesn't mean you wouldn't have magical power. It's just as a mystic, with Igraine as the divine feminine that in a sense brought the whole thing into being. There's something here about understanding your genesis and understanding the genesis of what you're meant to do, which when we get to the Torah is be a mystic, is connect to the divine. This is what this is about. So, and it's as though here with Chalice Hill, which is the sovereignty. So if we have the sword and then the sovereignty is about balance. Chalice Hill is about balancing the divine masculine and divine feminine. So we get the two characters almost, and then we get the balance. So this is saying to me that I almost feel that it doesn't matter what your gender is. This isn't about gender. I almost feel like you tilt towards the divine masculine. You tilt towards the magician rather than the high priestess, for instance. There's no problem with that. But to be the true mystic, you have to balance both. So the sword, it's like Merlin. The Merlin side of you is helping you understand the Igraine side or the divine feminine, helping you understand that pulling that sword, having that power, helps you to come into balance, helps you to take your sovereignty and move forward, which is necessary then for the Torah, which is about connecting with source. And it's very interesting because if you look at high magic has as its aspiration, and alchemy has it as its aspiration, an androgynous figure, a understanding of both those energies within us. So it's a very high order spiritual thing to do this. This to me is a very high order spiritual map. Merlin is talking to you about that and is saying that, as I say, it's more like you tilt to the magician, the high priestess. What this is all about is reclaiming the high priestess in a way. That's as I say, or the divine feminine, balancing that out, clearing out any emotional energy. This could well be people who've either been in a very patriarchal family, patriarchal work environment, patriarchal sort of community or political system or something. So it may have been that the wisdom was to really accentuate the divine masculine, but to get to the mystical path, you also have to look at the divine feminine and honor that sort of thing. So this is what this is about. It's interesting. It's very spiritual. It's very much about mysticism, but it is saying that Merlin is saying to you that the thing at the moment is to get the sense of bringing the two elements together. It's like you're underestimating your own power if you only work in the patriarchal, mental, logical sphere. There's also the mystical and intuitive as well. So what we're going to do to look at each of these is for each of these, we're going to get 3 cards for a little bit more about what Merlin is saying about that aspect for you, and then 3 cards for either advice or a challenge that you might be dealing with. So we'll start with Igraine, we'll start with the sword, we'll start with the power, which has to do with understanding the divine feminine. We're using the tarot for this. So firstly, 3 cards for understanding the power of your beauty, the power of your femininity, the power of your intuition. What does Merlin want to say to you about that? Page of Swords, Knight of Cups reversed, 2 of Cups. Okay. So this may well be, as I say, I think there's probably like 2 ways that this energy could be operating at the moment, and kind of like this is why you have to take this up to become the mystic and connect to source. One is that you are in a very patriarchal, non-romantic, non-spiritual environment. And the communication is very much of the mind. It's kind of harsh. It's quick. Maybe not overly mature. That's not saying you are, but like the environment you're in. I just feel like for some of you, Merlin is saying, yes, you are in a very unromanticized, unspiritual environment or whatever. It could be a relationship as well too, or it could be that a relationship is actually making you realize that you need to balance that within yourself because you've tilted, as I say, towards this because of the environment, or even past relationships that were not true. Merlin is saying, in a way, that if this is about love, if this is about you getting to the sort of spiritual energy of bringing in, a divine counterpart or whatever it might be, you actually have to understand what has happened by things that haven't worked to bring the right energy in. And if you balance within yourself first, you then can actually better bring in the love. So whether this is about love, that is ultimately a mystical connection, a soul mate or something like that, or whether it is that you are dealing with a very unsympathetic, patriarchal, controlled, very much of the mind, not of the heart, that kind of energy. you are wanting to bring this into balance, both spiritually and possibly to bring, a nicer environment in. So the power for you is to bring the balance in. The power is to communicate what is not sort of kind. There's something unkind about the energy that you've been dealing with. So to come back to the kindness and communicate what you want in whatever way it is. That's what the sword is. That's what Igraine is bringing you. That's what your version of Excalibur is bringing you right now, is the capacity to get that in balance and find the right sort of environment, the right person, the right love. So what challenges or advice does Merlin have for you on that particular aspect? Six of Pentacles reversed. Ace of Wands reversed, Temperance reversed. Okay, he's saying it's not in balance at the moment. And he's saying as a result of it, your power, your beauty, your relationship, your passion, whatever it is a little bit submerged. But he is saying the advice is to find places where you can be seen as an equal. So if this is around, work or something like that, don't necessarily, if you can, don't go for an environment where you have a lot of people above you hierarchically and it's a very traditional hierarchical energy. Go for somewhere where you can work in teams with equals potentially, because that will help you unearth your own creative energy and what you can bring in, and that in turn will help with balance. If it's around relationship, he's saying the problem you have is that you're not finding equals. You're finding people who are suppressing your power, suppressing your generosity, that kind of thing. And if you get into balance, you're not going to do that to the same extent. You're going to look for that which is more equal. So I think that this is all about you understanding that either the environment that you're in or the people that you're around are reflecting your own internal imbalance where you're tilting towards it. And it may well be it's kind of one of those things, that circular energy, that you've had to do it in the environment you're in. Don't think that Merlin is criticizing you. I think he's just saying you actually have the power to bring that together. And that's the only way, in whatever way this will be, that you can truly unleash your beauty, your creativity, all of that kind of thing, and get the balance that's inherent in you to do. So I do think when we get to Morgan Le Fay, that's going to be very important, because it's probably the parts of you that magically you aren't valuing as much as I say, the high magician type of thing. So then let's see, if we know that this is about, Igraine is coming in as your sword to help you understand that balance and why that's important to you. Then, as I say, it's bringing into balance. You become a sovereign to yourself when you bring it into balance. So let's see what Merlin has to say about that. King of Swords, Nine of Cups, Five of Swords. Okay. Firstly, what Merlin is saying is this is not saying you exchange one for the other. This is not saying that, Igraine has come along, it's all the divine feminine, it's all the heart, and that's all that I do, and I stop thinking. For balance, you need to also connect with Merlin. You also need to have and that kind of high magic or the kind of logical thing. It's saying that you're very well developed on that, and there is nothing wrong with that. It's bringing the other thing into balance. And it's like what Merlin is saying here is why it's got out of balance is it's almost like you have had a dream or a wish and you feel like you're fighting in the wrong environment or the wrong people or something like that to do it. And he's saying that the logical thing to do, if this energy is starting to come in and you're wanting to get it into balance, you've got to let go of the battles that are more sort of, as I say, I'm keep using patriarchal, but I'm really just thinking of the more sort of structured rules of the world, rules of the mind. You've got to let go of those ones that are getting in the way of the dream, and then focus that intellect on the dream. And the best way to do that is to come into balance, because it's in this space, in the Nine of Cups, that I think there is the connection of the heart that connects to the divine feminine. So it really is understanding that you've battled when you didn't need to battle, or you're in the environment that's making you battle. So think about when and how you could leave to find a better environment. So let's see what the advice is to achieve the sovereignty of the chalice, to be able to have it in balance. Eight of Cups. Yeah, there's moving away from something. Page of Cups reversed. Anything that's not true of the heart, anything that's not clear of the heart. Ace of Pentacles reversed. It's understanding, I think why Merlin is wanting to say this to you is because I say a lot of this is about a spiritual path. This is about connecting to source. I do think, though, with the Ace of Pentacles reversed, and with what I'm feeling about this, because it's either in a relationship or it's in a workplace, there's something where you're in the wrong place or with the wrong energy, or if you are with someone and you do feel it's your divine counterpart or something, the energy that's difficult at the moment, it's you have to balance within first, because there is huge material potential, but it isn't being accessed yet. And so firstly, you have to work out what you want emotionally. You've really worked out what you want intellectually really, really well, but there's emotional patterns you're not letting go of. And I think that for whatever this is, it's the emotion is where it's painful. The mind is where you can kind of be a bit detached. But there is something very material, whether it's, a better job, a business, going after the grail and the quest in a material way, a relationship, a child. It could be any of those things. And in fact, for some of you, with Igraine being the mother of Arthur, it may be connected to having children. All of these things, what Merlin is saying is that there's some emotional clearance that's necessary for that to happen and to bring it into balance, which is what the chalice is talking about. So then the seeker, what you're seeking then is the connection to source with the Taur. So let's see what Merlin is saying about that. 8 of Wands, Wheel of Fortune reversed, the Fool. Okay, so once you get this, once you bring it into balance, you move very quickly forward and move away from where the timing has been out. In fact, the timing will stay out until you've got into balance. It's almost like the wheel can't right itself because things are out of balance. But once you actually go, aha, that's what I want, you're very strongly connected. Even the way the 8 of Wands is done in this deck, it's like it is an illumination. It's like it's a connection to source. That starts you on a new journey. So there is something wanting to be born, and I'm meaning that in a very broad sense. So the mystical journey, you have the connection, you understand. I think, and for some of you, this is a connection that occurs outside of space and time. So once you've got this imbalance, it's a very mystical thing that gives you your new journey, your new path. So it is something very new. And maybe that's why you have to get this imbalance and connect, because if it's a very mystical thing, it's not sort of something that you've encountered before. So let's see what the advice or challenge is associated with that. 6 of Wands reversed, 4 of Swords, 10 of Pentacles reversed. Okay, all right. It's a long journey. So this is why you have to get into balance, and this is why you have to have both the Merlin energy and kind of the Morgan Le Fay or Nimue, whatever you want to say, Igraine energy, because this is a very internal journey. Once you've done this, it's very internal. Even if it's playing out around work and you actually do start to sort of build something out of that, it's not sort of something that is immediately apparent to others. This is an internal connection between you and source. It is not about you suddenly sort of getting the glittering prizes or being validated. In fact, you have to kind of move away from anything like that. So if some of this thing, whether it's spiritually or in your work life or in relationships, you look towards the magic energy of Merlin, that kind of side of you, and the kind of the almost dominant energy of it, to win something or be seen or achieve something, that's what's got you out of balance. Because what this is saying is that the challenge is, for a while, it's quite hidden, because part of what you need to be involved in is breaking down old patterns. It could be old patterns from your family, karma from your ancestors. It could be one sort of business system or social system to bring in the new. Like, that has to precede this being born. So there's a sense of, you can't even show what your new journey is. The first part of the journey is going to be about how one moves away from the past, and it needs to be very private, just between you and source, basically, because something has to end before something else begins. And so some of this, getting this into balance, is to understand, I feel like a gestation period. I think this is why we started with the sword being Igraine. I think it's like she was the mother of Arthur. That had to happen. And, all the things that happened sort of like politically and in the sort of royalty sort of stuff around that with what Merlin did, that had to happen for anything to start, for anything to be born. So that's where you're up to with this, whether this is very allegorical about a spiritual journey. And once you get into balance, you'll realize there's a much bigger thing you've got to do, and you've got to do it very, very reverently and privately and in balance, because it's not really the material world. And for some of you, it is the path straight to mysticism, and it's not really material at that point. But for others of you, there is something material here, but you have to see the old fall for the new to come up. So it really depends on how it's playing out. So what I want to do is get you from the Weird Sisters deck either a spell or a magical energy for each stage. Then we're going to see what Morgan Le Fay has to say. So firstly, around a grain, around finding your beauty, finding your divine feminine, maybe, as I say, I'm going to say this in a very broad sense, being pregnant with the possibility. It's not that you have to be having a child, but being pregnant with the possibility. The energy around that. A spell for joy. This is meant to bring you happiness. And that's why we had the Nine of Cups before. This is meant to bring you happiness. See the feet taking you towards freedom. So it's like, see this as a joyful thing. Then when we look at bringing things into balance with the chalice, so this is your sovereignty, when you really kind of clear the energy out and bring your divine masculine and feminine into balance. Oh, wow, chalice offering. We've got chalice again. Very holy grail. This is the offering. This is an offering you're doing to Source. This is part of what this is about, however it plays out. I think that for any of you, it's about love too. This is a bit like getting the Ace of Cups. It's definitely saying there's something there. Once you get this into balance, it's meant to be joyful. Wow. And then in terms of a spell or an energy or an implement, anything in the kind of witchy environment, like what we would get around the mystical connection of the tour. A spell for silence. Now that makes sense. What you're doing will have to be very private for a long time. Like it won't be forever necessarily, but it will be for a long time. So it's important what you're doing, but it is very reverent in whatever way it plays out. Okay, so let's see what Morgan Le Fay has to say. So we're going to look firstly with just an energy around this that she would point out. Dark feminine, okay. So this may be that there's shadow work in this as well. It could be if you've been dealing with the dark masculine around the sort of like the environment you're in, the people that you're in, then the dark feminine is what's needed to balance it. This might be you need to make an assessment of that. Otherwise, understanding the shadow and what to let go of is important because there's a lot about emotional cleansing here. The dark feminine is not necessarily evil. The dark masculine is not necessarily evil, but it is a shadowy energy. So for this to be at its most pure, it needs to be done reverently, as I say, and with true honesty. So a lot of what Morgan Le Fay is trying to bring you is that you can have the beauty and know what you're doing is beautiful and bring something beautiful in and bring joy in, but you need to understand the shadow as well. She wants that to be important. So let's see, between her and Merlin, we're going to look at a couple of cards from the Magic and Mediums deck, one for each, to say something about the magic that they help bring you for this. And we're going to do the same thing with the Celtic Spirit deck for other sort of spiritual energy that's around it. So from Merlin, firstly, he points out or brings to you banish, being able to banish that which needs to be banished. So I think also with the dark feminine here, I think there's something about this to get to the pure energy. There's a lot of darkness that surrounds the light. The light throws shadows. So I think that Merlin will help you with that so that you can keep clearing the energy out. And then what does Morgan Le Fay bring you? Portal, the connection in, the connection between worlds, the capacity on astral travel, connect with your guides, connect ultimately to source. And it makes sense. If you need to bring in the divine feminine as well, you need that, the balance to be the portal. So it is necessary for the divine feminine energy to be part of this. And if it's, as I say, dark feminine energy, to have cleared out the shadows to be able to make that portal work and take you where you want to go. So then around the Celtic support power or energy around this, Merlin brings Fawn, beginnings, willingness, opportunities. So this is like you can do this new thing. You can bring it in with a kind of innocence and a great natural connection. So he is triggering this by bringing you this message. And then Morgan Le Fay, rest, stop, recharge, self-care. She's going to make sure that you do what you need to do, take the time out. And also the Four of Swords there is not only silence, but it is also the self-care that's necessary. She will support you and make sure that you don't burn yourself out in the process of doing this. So you've got a lot of really strong support from both of them to do what you need to do. I think because it's such a reverent, mystical energy around this in whatever way it plays out. Okay, so let's see what stars guide you. Neptune, yeah, very psychic energy, very, very much in the liminal space. This is very, as I said at the beginning, this is all about the path of the mystic, no matter how it plays out. The mystic finding their divine counterpart, the mystic becoming a full-blown mystic and almost like withdrawing a bit from the world and making it all about that, or somebody bringing that divine feminine masculine mystical energy to a more material outcome. Then we have the 5th house. For some of you, it's going to be about love. For some, it's going to be about creativity. For some, it's going to be about children. There is that energy potentially around that with the Ace of Pentacles reversed with Igraine. That is a possibility depending upon who's come to this reading. And Capricorn. So yeah, for some, it's about what you do in the material world and about power in the material world in one form or another. So for something like I just got, and it's going to probably only be for 1 or 2 people at some point who see this, but given Igraine, given Merlin's role in Igraine, becoming pregnant with Arthur, with some of this energy, for some of you, it may be that the path that you're doing to bring this together is finding your other half, and either you or the other person, depending upon the biological capacities or whatever, may be bringing in a very, very powerful child in some way. So that's a possibility. But as I say, that's very specific. It's not going to be everybody. Okay, so to finish off, I just want to bring you a blessing on the journey. So again, going to a deck that sort of has a kind of Celtic feeling to it, witchy sort of feeling to it. Your blessing from this discussion, this dialogue with Merlin is a blessing on a journey. Yeah, and we had the Fool. This is going on something new. I keep getting freedom. I think for some of you, this is to set you free from something by bringing you into balance and making it possible to be free. And winged creatures, watch for synchronicities with birds, I think. But this is the beginning of a journey. This is the beginning of a quest. But this is the balance is almost to make sure that you've packed right. You're ready for that. You've got everything that you need. So very mystical though, very, very spiritual. I hope that this resonates for you. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. If you care to share in the comments, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome part 2 to your reading. So you came to the reading with the Starr from the Somnia Tarot. And it was funny because when I was sort of looking, we had the Hermit card for pile 1, and it looked like Merlin going on a bit of a journey. This almost looks like Merlin standing on the top of a hill looking out into the distance, what's coming, the journey to come. And it has a similar sort of hermit-like solitary energy, and there is a kind of a solitary energy about this too. This is looking at the cards that we have here to represent the sword, the sovereign, and the seeker, or the power, purpose, and path. There is a sense of this being a very individual pathway for you. So you standing out as a star, you having a particular thing to do. Now, there's 2 ways that I would read these cards. One is, actually there's almost 3. One is that it is the pathway of someone moving into a leadership role in some way, and maybe not because they necessarily sought the crown or sought the power, but because they are trying to right a wrong or to stand up for justice in some way. And they are very eloquent. Their sovereignty comes from eloquence and the beauty in the way that they can speak. But in seeking or the pathway itself, they have to make sure that they walk the talk. So that's one way of reading this. The other way is that someone who has a cause is also very creative, and they become a leader in a creative field by marrying the cause with the beauty of what they do creatively. And for some, it could be a bit of a combination of both. That's why I say it could be that there could be an actual, like powerful position or something that comes through or is influenced by creative energy in some way. The reason I'm saying that is that firstly, for the sword, it's extraordinary. You've got the Lady of the Lake. She gives the sword to Arthur. So there is a sense here where you've been chosen. What Merlin is saying to you is you are meant to be a star in something. You've been chosen. But this is very much about doing the right thing as well. The reason that King Arthur, which is in the pathway, the King Arthur was given the sword was because he would right wrongs, he would bring a more balanced society or community into being. He was the right person at the right time, all of that kind of thing. So there's something here about you taking on the sword of righteousness. Then we have Taliesin, who is a bard. Now, this talks about using Taliesin a bit as your sort of muse, and like poetry and music and the arts and creative expression. So when we look at the sovereignty, this tells me that there is something creative or beautiful or eloquent in the way that you take the sovereignty on. Your power comes from a cause, but the thing that makes you the star, I think, is that you're extremely articulate. You think of certain politicians that are very good at expressing things. You can also think about people who have a big impact on social and political issues and so forth through their creative work, through music that they write, through books that they write. There's something here very articulate, very eloquent, maybe sort of talented in the arts in a more broad sense, but there's something about that allows you to take your sovereignty when you know what your cause is. And then the path, though, is not just to do that for the sake of creating something beautiful that you're inspired by. There is a sense of knowing if you are to answer the call of the sword, you need to lead out on some level. With King Arthur, it's about owning your power and your ability, but doing it in such a way that you do, as I say, walk the talk. That's what this feels like in whatever way it plays out. So what we're going to do with tarot is that we're going to start with 3 cards for each of these steps, which are a little bit more about what Merlin is saying to you about each step. And then we're going to get 3 cards for each of them about what challenges or advice does Merlin have around it. So when we're talking about the Lady of the Lake to start with, we're asking Merlin here for a little bit more about what is the sword of righteousness that is the power that is being given to pile 2 here, or is being offered to pile 2 to take up the responsibility of carrying, I think, is probably a little bit more precise. The Empress reversed, the 6 of Wands, the Ace of Swords. Okay. So a lot of this group, you're very articulate, you're very clever, you're very able to sort of come up with things that are innovative and new. You would use someone like Taliesin as a muse. You don't need to kind of just copy other people's ideas. You're very innovative. There's an innovative energy here, and you will be known for it, and you probably already are, but you certainly are going to become known for it. But there's something here about the reclamation of the divine feminine. So the Lady of the Lake bringing you the sword, there's something here about bringing that into a situation, whatever this situation is, to bring things into balance. It is a creative energy. For some of you, this is saying that the sword is to remind you that you have this underneath creative ability that you haven't really brought to the table yet. When you do, by using Taliesin as a muse, that kind of energy will bring you the recognition and the ideas and the forward momentum that you want, and the blessing around an idea, a blessing around the sword. I always think of the Ace of Swords as being like Excalibur, so it's really interesting. You've got the Ace of Swords here, and you've got the Lady of the Lake. There's definitely something new you're meant to bring forward. You're meant to take up the sword. You're meant to take up the baton. You will be recognised for it. This is not a hidden away thing, but it's either that you haven't married your creativity to your cause yet, but when you do, that's the aha moment, or there's something about the divine feminine. So what challenge or advice, could be either or a bit of both, does Merlin want to talk to you about in this aspect of it? 5 of Cups, you've been disappointed before about certain things. 7 of Swords reversed, but you're very, very realistic about it, so that's good. Page of Cups, but you protect your heart. Okay. I'm not sure overall that protecting your heart is a problem here, in as much as there is something here about leadership ideas or whatever. The only thing that becomes an issue, you can be very realistic about the fact that there's been disappointments before, but I think that Merlin is saying that protect your heart, but still know what your heart wants to say, because there's something very much of the heart in terms of that muse energy, in terms of the creativity. So you need to, instead of being in a position of what is wrong and lack and what is suppressed, defining what that is, defining the heart and connecting it to the mind will probably take you further. You're realistic enough. What this is saying, what Merlin wants you to know is that if you worry that if you give in to your heart, you're not going to get sentimental or mawkish or deluded. You will move forward. You'll have the strength. It will actually help your eloquence. You're like a brilliant technician creatively who, if you bring your heart to it, it elevates it to a whole other level. So let's then have a look at Taliesin. Let's have a look at if you are coming into your sovereignty by understanding your creative potential in whatever way that is. What else does Merlin want to say about that for you? The Sun, yeah, this is part of your life path. You are meant to really shine. Eight of Cups, there's something emotional, a pathway to let go of, to allow the sun to come up. Eight of Coins reversed, but know that you've mastered what you need to master. This is not, as I say, this is why I said you feel like this brilliant technician and you just got to bring your heart to it. Yeah, because you've already mastered the techniques. Whatever you need to do, you've already done that. But you've kind of walked away from the emotion. If you bring the emotion back in, that's where it really lights up. So there's something about that. I feel like, some of you, if this is a cause, you might have felt you have to be very precise, like almost like a lawyer in a courtroom. But if you think about it, the lawyers that are really, really successful, particularly around like criminal or social or human rights law, also touch the heartstrings. Like they know the emotional power as well as the facts and so forth. So, but you've already mastered it. Merlin wants you to know that's not a problem. There's no deficit of skill here. It's just how you connect your cause, your calling to your heart. So what advice does Merlin have about it? The World reversed, knowing that this is not a finished thing. You're a work in progress. Four of Coins reversed, and it's almost like you have to sometimes undo and unlearn certain things to allow new energies to come through. Queen of Swords reversed, and you're far too critical of yourself. Like the Queen of Swords reversed is a bit like a reverse of the Lady of the Lake. Remember that the Lady of the Lake chose you. Don't be so hard on yourself. Like you're a perfectionist. You are. There's something about you. You're incredibly eloquent, incredibly talented in whatever way this sort of plays out. You're an incredibly good technician. You just need to connect your heart, but you kind of like, how will that affect technique? Sometimes you've got to unlearn some of the technique and some of the self-critique to actually become the finished thing. Like it really interests me that the Eight of Coins came up reversed, because to me, I keep saying, I say this often, the way I read the Eight of Coins is like someone who's learnt to paint and they've painted with the masters and they've learnt all the technique and they're brilliant. And it's at the point that they've done all that and they've surpassed the need to worry just about the technique. That's when they can unravel it all and find who they truly are. And they're not so much kind of like, is the precision of the brushwork the way it should be? It's more, what are they going to express? So there's something about that involved in all of this. So then when we look at King Arthur taking on the responsibility, the path is taking on that responsibility, achieving the goal, and connecting all of your abilities and using them to their highest order. What does Merlin want to say about that? Six of Swords, Seven of Cups, the Hanged Man. Okay, so Merlin says, okay, once you've got all that together and whatever this is, whatever your cause is, in whatever way you do it, that will give you your navigation. You will know, you will be calm and know you're on the right path. You will also know that you have to dream big. But there's something, I'm feeling very strongly about this, that there's something about the sovereignty here that it's many buckets you have to fill. There's many things you're going to have to think about. So it's important that you've got that kind of way of expressing things. This is definitely the sort of energy of someone whose words, creativity, whatever it is, like kind of can bring about an ideal and meet. It's like reaching multiple audiences in some way. And there might be some sacrifices that you need to do as a result of that. Like it may be that you have a very pure message that you'd like to give to like one of these Seven of Cups. It's like that's the one to go to. But to get the real thing and to be the proper sovereign, the proper person who's really doing what they're saying, you've got to kind of take it to a lot of audiences, not just those that you would have sort of seen as being on your side or the prime ones. So there's something there. I think you also are going to bring in a different perspective, and things may take a bit of time. Don't be worried about delays. Allow that to be time to think about your message to multiple audiences. So what are the challenges or advice around being King Arthur in this situation? The Fool, knowing that this is a new journey, Judgment, and it's your calling, so you don't really have a choice. And King of Coins, because it's the once and future king type of energy. There is certainly something very material that's meant to come out of this. If it's a creative endeavour, you're meant to make money out of it or something like that. Meant to create a legacy, meant to create something that's solid and lasting. But you're starting from the very beginning. It's a long journey. So that's probably why the star there looks a bit like Merlin looking from the top of the hill at the distance. There is a long journey, but it's the dawn coming up. This is a beautiful energy coming up. So it's a good thing to follow, but you've got to do it anyway. And it's soon. If you haven't already felt this, it's soon with Judgment. The calling is going to come quite quickly in whatever way this plays out. So as I said, what we are going to do is we're going to have a look at the divine feminine energy. The first sort of thing with that, before we talk to Morgan Le Fay, is to use a deck called the Weird Sisters deck, to have a look again for each of these for a spell or a spiritual energy that is important to each stage for you. So to getting the sword from the Lady of the Lake, understanding you have a cause, a candle for receptivity. Okay, so this is bringing in the energy to be prepared to take that on. To say, okay, I'm prepared that this isn't just about being talented or having leadership abilities or whatever. This is actually, I have a cause. I have a longer term cause. So this is allowing you to be receptive to hearing the message. I think for many of you, it will download in some way. Then the energy around your creativity, your eloquence, your articulate nature, whatever it is. A spell for balance. Okay, that's interesting. Now, if it's around something like music, you have to have balance. If it's like poetry, unless you're doing sort of free-form poetry, you need it to scan, like the best poetry is a bit like lyrics. It will scan, it will have a balance, it will have a rhythm. There's something about bringing everything into balance and sort of moving forward with something that is, the structure is good. There's something about the structure here. So this brings the right structure in, the right balance of sun and moon, the right balance of head and heart, but also there's something in the way that you present this, in whatever artistic form it is that is balanced. And then for the king, which knows that this is a long journey and it has heft, it has importance. It's got a sort of real world implication. We have a wand to make. Okay, so it's like the power to bring this in, the manifestation power, which makes sense for the King of Coins. Once you've got that into balance, you're going forward and you're meeting your cause and using all your skills. You have the magic to actually manifest something out of this. Okay, so let's see what Morgan Le Fay wants to say. So we've been talking to Merlin for the sort of divine masculine sort of magic energy. Morgan Le Fay is a very strong magical energy also in the legends, but more from the divine feminine. Let's see her perspective on what this is about. Visionary. Okay, yeah, you're a visionary. So actually, candle to me, wands, maybe it's not so much you get a download that's like in words, it may be in vision. For some of you, it may be very visual art that you use, or it could be a combination of that. If you're a musician, you might have very interesting sort of like videos that go with the music, something like that. But she's saying, you're a visionary. You can see in the long term. You get a visionary concept. You can see the world that could be. There's a quote, I think it was Robert F. Kennedy, who said it. I'm really not sure about my American political history. It's either that or maybe it was JFK. I'm not sure. But it's something like some people look at the world, and this is not going to be exactly right, but some people look at the world and ask why, and I look at the world that could be and ask why not, or something. That's probably butchering an amazing phrase. You would be much better at this than me, but it's something like that. This is like being able to see what could be. This is why we've got the energy. This is the Fool. It's seeing something ahead of when there's even a prototype. So there's something like that. If this is playing out around something that is very creative, like, every once in a while somebody comes along and they're just like a genius because they bring in a completely different type of music or art or whatever. There could be something in that for some of you. But she's definitely saying you're a visionary. So then we're going to have a little bit of a dialogue between Merlin and her. So we're going to start with Merlin and then Morgan Le Fay, and we're going to look at magical energy and Celtic spiritual energy that they are either bringing to you or a part of it. So around magical energy, Merlin is either bringing or pointing out in you conjure, the capacity to conjure, to manifest, but also to conjure spirits, energies, all of that kind of thing. Very powerful on that level. You can do that and conjure up the vision, conjure up the music, the art, whatever it is, the right words at the right time. And Morgan Le Fay says, in terms of magic that you have, banish, able to banish that which is not true anymore, that is not good. Banish the things that take you away from the principle, that helps you stay in line with the purpose of what you're doing, because there is a purpose to this, and there isn't a requirement to walk the talk. So you can banish the energies that would take you away from the purity of the vision. In terms of Celtic energy coming to it, Merlin is pointing out heart center, connection, love and receiving. So There's something here that could bring love in, or the love of the masses is what helps you move forward. But there's something about being connected to the heart that is important. And Morgan Le Fay says, she of the woods, peace, connection, home. Isn't it interesting because the visionary looks like she's in the woods. I feel like Morgan Le Fay is saying to most of you, if you really want to connect to her and her support and her understanding, get out into nature. I feel like getting out into nature is going to be very inspirational for you and connect to that side of it. Okay, let's see what stars guide you in this. Gemini, your communication ability. Yeah, like the way that you speak, sing, talk, or communication on a broader level, visually or whatever it might be, you're off the charts with this. It's very, very important to this, and the balance that you can bring to it. And you can see two different perspectives, all of that kind of thing. Water, very emotionally connected. There is an emotional resonance to what you bring to things. And Mars, but there's ambition as well. So it's like, yeah, you're a brilliant communicator, you're of the heart, but in the end, you're meant to do something. There's meant to be a kind of sovereignty is very important with this. And following the path is one of sovereignty. Okay, so to finish off, we're just going to get a blessing. So just kind of a blessing from, again, this sort of era, this sort of tradition that brings it all together for you, file 2. So the blessing that Merlin brings you overall is, wow, a blessing for unity where once there was division. So there's something in your leadership and cause that is to bring unity. And I think that makes perfect sense with someone who has an artistic beauty. And, there might have been division in some sort of creative endeavor and you bring unity. So there's something about that. So you're going to be able to do that because of your very particular set of skills, as they say. So I hope that resonates for you. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. If you care to share in the comments, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome, pile 3, to your reading. So you came to the reading with the world, with this rather beautiful woman surrounded by kind of what I feel like is very Celtic sort of imagery and so forth. The world is about completion. I think that there's a spiritual and heart completion because of the colouring here. But it's also, it looks to me like, and this is often the case, that the woman in the thing is pregnant. So there's something new. After the completion, there's something new. I think that's the main energy. I think if you've been drawn to this from the imagery, I think it's aligning with this, because this is all about a journey of finding the new after you have closed out on the past and you are now changing within yourself, finding what is really true to you and then claiming your power. That's what it's really about, because here, remember, the world, as I say, says that if you've come to the right reading, this is a pretty clear indication. If you have something in your life has come to an end or is about to come to an end. It could be a job, it could be a relationship, it could be a particular course of study, it could be anything, a spiritual pathway, you're going to be an initiate or an adept or a master or something like that. Something is coming to the end. But what's going to happen with this is it's meant to create a completely new you. So it's almost like, say it was graduation. You use it, but you're going to use the skills in a very different way to the way that you expected. And there's actually a pathway here of shattering what might have been the preconceptions about what you could do with this, so you find your true power. Because this is the power, the purpose and the path, or the sword, the sovereignty and the seeker. So the power is around passing away from what was old and letting it go to allow something new in. That's the Isle of Avalon, So if you think about the legend of King Arthur, at the end of his life, he went to Avalon, and it is prophesied he will return, so the once and future king. So this is a sort of a sense of being able to go, the power of this is to be able to go within and to know what no longer serves you and what this change is. It is a presage of great change in circumstance, great change within you, and knowing that you have the power and the purpose to do it. So that tells me that change is coming in. The ending brings in a profound change, and maybe more than you thought, because what you're being asked to do when you're taking up your purpose, when you're taking up your sovereignty, is to shatter all the illusions in your life. The Lady of Shalott had she pined for a love that was not hers. So that this is not to say that The thing that you achieved was not yours, but it's now to really claim what is yours. You have to almost shatter everything that's around that that's not true. Anything that's an illusion, anything that no longer serves you, anything that won't take you forward to the next step. So this is, you find your sovereignty in a very internal process of self-reflection, self-knowledge, and letting go of that which no longer serves, so that you don't get trapped in the past, because at the point that something ends, sometimes we can get trapped in that. Particularly if the change looks so much that we feel like, oh, does that make that a sunk cost? Is that a loss? And it's not. It's just that it's taking to a particular point after which you change. You couldn't have got there without finishing whatever this was, but now it opens up a whole other vista of opportunity. And the way that you're being asked to look at this is to understand that you've got to shatter all illusions and be very, very honest with yourself. Because then the seeker goes with the mists of Avalon to Avalon, goes to get your power, goes to understand all that you could be. You can't do that if you haven't already worked out what you're not. So this is a very self-reflective opportunity. This is like what could be born from you, what now could happen that is very different, very transformational, and that allows you to find your power and your purpose in a much more clear way. But you can't even go on that journey until you've done this bit. And you've got to recognize that the ending of something is not just kind of like, well, now that's done, that's all good. There's a next step, there's a bigger thing, there's a more profound change. So this is all about you really knowing yourself. That's what this is about, and then understanding your power. So given that, what we're going to do with this with tarot is that for each of these stages, we're going to get firstly 3 cards that are a little bit more information from Merlin about this stage, and then we're going to look at any advice or challenge, 3 cards for that, for each stage again, so that we just get a little bit more information about each. So when we're talking about the Isle of Avalon, there's sort of knowing that something new has to be born, that there is a new potential coming following the ending of something or the completion of something. It may not be the ending, it may just be the completion of a stage. Let's see what else Merlin wants to say about this. King of Wands, the Emperor. Wow, there's a lot of power around this. The Four of Cups. Okay. All right, so I think what this is saying, whatever you've completed, it's significant, and that'll depend on where you are in your life, but it wouldn't surprise me if you've completed, a kind of career sort of trajectory and you're now in a position of power, or, you ran for office and you're now sort of been elected, or you've done a qualification and you're now recognised as and I'd say a higher level of qualification here to be recognised as a sort of leader in your space. But what Merlin is saying is, you could kind of rest on your laurels there, but you're going to feel discontented because you're going to sense what this energy, what the sword is showing you, what the power is showing you is that there's something more that can happen. And you don't want to get stuck and there's some risks of getting stuck, liking the sort of like the achievement and the sort of recognition and the power that goes with it. In the end, that will be an empty chalice. In the end, that won't work for you. So you have to go beyond that. It's almost like, you become the king and then you have to abdicate to become something more. And that's just as an analogy. But there's something here about understanding that reaching the zenith of one thing is a stepping off point to be the full and stepping forward and beginning again and really transforming yourself. So, and for some of you, this comes about because you've done enough to know that you want to tilt it at an illegitimate power. But the only way for you to do it is to truly understand yourself. That's the other way you could read this. It's like you've got high enough in an organisation to understand how it really runs and you're not happy. So, it just depends on whether it's you as the powerful person now who has to kind of reconfigure yourself, or whether you've got high enough or achieved enough now to see where change is necessary. Let's see what Merlin wants to give either as advice or warn you as a challenge around this sort of birthing of something new. 8 of Wands, the Magician. Sorry, I just knocked the camera a bit there. 7 of Cups. All right, okay, all right. This is actually telling me why the Lady of Shalott is coming into the sort of the purpose and understanding what it takes to be the sovereign here. This is saying that you have the skills that you need to move very fast towards whatever you want. So whatever it is that you've completed has really given you skills, understanding, confidence, all of that kind of thing. You could go very fast towards the ideal. You equally could go too fast and go towards an illusion. The important thing is understanding yourself. The magician in many ways has all the skills, but he's almost like the early version of temperance that has brought it into a kind of alchemical balance. So there is a risk at feeling so powerful and so strong and so knowledgeable that you rush towards something without knowing all of what it could be because you haven't done the examination of yourself yet. So that's a risk. Having said that, if you do this, then you could move very quickly. So it's not that you would find it a huge challenge to do the change if you're prepared to look at yourself. If one of the skills that you really focus on is that. So let's have a look at that, because it's a very pivotal point. If you didn't get this right, if you don't really look in the mirror of yourself and understand yourself and shatter all illusions, then you're not going to pick up the full power that you could. So what does Merlin want to say about that energy for you? 10 of Pentacles reversed, 9 of Swords, Ace of Wands. Okay, all right. It's not an easy birth into the new, I've got to say. There is definitely a feeling here. I don't know exactly how it's playing out, but there's definitely a feeling of something that you've built towards you almost have to be prepared to walk away from. Or you have to understand that it will only last for a time. It could be either. With the 10 of Pentacles reversed, it's like there's almost like you've got to the top of what you could get out of whatever this is. It would be even more the case if it was the King of Pentacles reversed. But nevertheless, the 10 of Pentacles reversed works in a similar way. Something will not last long term. So it's kind of, if you weren't prepared, if you were just going, I've got where I want to get, that's all there is to it, and you ignore that there is so much more that you could do, it's going to be a law of diminishing returns. But the thing for you is that going through this self-reflection could either be incredibly inspiring or incredibly upsetting. Like, I feel like with the 9 of Swords you may feel some guilt, you may feel, or if you don't do it, you'll feel guilt. Like, there's something where there's anxiety associated with this, but it's like you can't avoid it just because of that, because you think, oh, if I just don't go for the next level, I'll be fine. It won't actually work that way. So this is Merlin saying, take the opportunity as an inspirational one, and see that you have the kind of fiery energy as we saw before to move forward. So what advice or challenge is associated with that? It's always hard to look at ourselves and shatter all our illusions. Our illusions are very comforting, and we might have to face sides of ourselves in shadow that we don't like, but you can't just stay where you are. Not long term. You may be able to do it for a while, but to really find your power, you've got to move forward. So what is he saying around advice for you or challenges? 3 of Wands, the Tower. Yeah, you've got to be prepared to crash or crash. The Wheel of Fortune. It's the timing is very important, but ultimately there is something about this, something that has been completed, that even if it was satisfying and good for the time, is not going to last. It just isn't, because it was meant to be a threshold through which you walk to find your true power. If you are prepared to do the work, you will find the destination and fortune will be on your side. If you block that work, you'll be forced into going in that new direction anyway. So it's pretty full on. Pile 3, sorry. So let's have a look. Mists of Avalon suggests that the seeking, what you should seek through all this, is the true power, a power that is more spiritual and more magical and less sort of material, political, social, whatever this is. So let's see what Merlin wants to say about what you seek, being the seeker, the path. 5 of Swords reversed, 9 of Cups, 9 of Wands reversed. Okay. Part of this is knowing when to bother with a battle and when not to. What you need to have is a very clear idea about what is the wish. That should be your guiding light in all of this, because you're going to be in battles that are petty. You're going to be around people that are difficult. All of that is going to happen. That's why you have to kind of like move towards your true power and know yourself. 9 of Wands reversed could be a lot of effort not going to anything substantial. 5 of Swords reversed is needing to move away from battles that you've already lost. So you have to be able to kind of know when that's the case. But if you stay on course with what is the dream here, that's what you're being propelled to do. But there's something about this which really does say that it's not an easy journey you're on. That's why self-knowledge is so important, but you can head towards what you want. This is about the power to manifest what you want. So what advice or challenges are associated with the Miss of Avalon, with the path that you're on, what you're seeking? 10 of Wands, it's tiring. Sorry, I'm really sorry, pile 3. I mean, you're ultimately going to, if you sort of take this advice, you're going to do extremely well and it's going to be much more than what you think at the moment, but it's a tiring journey and it's a long journey. It's the journey of the new. 10 of Swords, but it's because it has to happen. It has to happen. Like the whole thing, it's really interesting actually, because although these are more kind of your kind of place, there's 2 places, the Tor and then the Avalon itself, and then you've got a tangential story to the key players in the Arthurian legend, and yet this feels in some ways the most like King Arthur's journey, because he creates this world, but he can't make it last forever, and in the end he goes to Avalon. So there's sort of a sense, and it's not saying that you're going to follow exactly that trajectory, but what it is saying is that if you understand that each achievement, each completion is the beginning of a new journey, and you're very honest with yourself about yourself, then you can really enhance your power. But the more that you do it, the more you're going to probably draw difficult energy around you. It's also why it's incredibly important. This is the most important card in the whole thing for you, is the self-knowledge and being honest with yourself. If you get carried away with your power, your ability, your spirituality, or whatever it is, then you will eventually get caught in doing something that is not your destiny or not your journey or not what you could be, just like the Lady of Shalott ended up pining for a love that wasn't hers. So there's a really strong message here about the potential, but also the risks. So what we're going to do is we're going to firstly see kind of spell or magical energy for each of them that could help. Then we're going to talk to Morgan Le Fay and see her perspective. So firstly, around the Tor, around knowing that you have to kind of start something new. A sigil for Eros. So for some of you, this is about bringing passion back into what you do. And that could make a lot of sense. You need to stay passionate about all of this because it's a long road and it's tiring. So a sigil for Eros would keep the fires burning even when it's difficult. The self-reflection energy, which as I say in this is probably the most powerful part of the message. Sigil for dream work. Okay, so go into the astral realm to learn that. Listen to your guides in the astral realm, and also connect to the dream. Always make this connect to the true dream, not to the egoic dream, not to the material dream, but the true dream. And then around eventually finding through doing that your true power with Avalon. A spell for balance. That's interesting. That came up for one of the others. Might have come up for both. I can't remember. It certainly came up for one of the others. So your true power is in balancing and getting everything into balance. So that's the other thing maybe to think about in terms of knowing yourself. What's in or out of balance could be very, very important. And, and like even just down to if this is a long journey, a lot of work or whatever, which I think for many of you it might be, then you have to make sure, you get plenty of sleep, you get good nutrition, all of that kind of thing as well. Let's see what Morgan Le Fay has to say. So we've been talking to Merlin, but the other really powerful, magical character in Legends was Morgan Le Fay. I mean, also to some extent Nimue, but we're talking to Morgan for this. So what's her perspective on this message from Merlin to you? Astral realm, well, that's interesting with dream work. I think she says, yes, a lot of the power and the energy and what you get will be in the astral realm. I feel like a lot of this is very much in the material world, but I feel like the astral realm, you can move between the dimensions really well. You can get a lot of information and energy for that. So pay attention to that. It's also why you've got Avalon as the place that you go to for your power. That's a very mystical place. So, but it's in the astral realm, I think, that you really get to know yourself and you can see who you are. One of the things I'm thinking about here for some of you might be something like shamanic journeying, where you go to the lower world and you connect with your soul. It's kind of very honest there, and honesty is very important. So it's just something to think about. So what we're also going to do here is a little bit of a dialogue between Merlin and Morgan. We're going to ask each about a magical ability that they either bring to you or that you have that will help, and then also about a Celtic spirit energy similarly. So firstly, around magic, Merlin would point out elemental magic. So you may well have that ability, and it's something that maybe it's a combination between being in the astral realm and then using elemental magic to bring the balance in, maybe bring the balance in that you need. And then Morgan would point out, believe. Oh, look in the mirror. You've got the mirror energy. She's saying you're not meant to look at yourself to shatter everything that you are. It's to find what is true to believe. Because like Lady of Shalott, her problem was that she was caught in an illusion. She had an illusory idea about something that wasn't what was true. But as long as you can get clear on who you are and see the proper reflection, you can believe in what you do. So she's saying this process is not to make you not believe, it's to make you believe in more than maybe you expected and to be able to go on to this higher level, but you can only do it if you're honest with yourself. Okay, so what about the Celtic spirit energy? What does Merlin have to say about that? Ceridwen, transformation, knowledge and magic. Yeah, so this is all about transformation. Like that's what this first step is as well. Like you are transforming. Like that's part of it. And it is very magical and you have the knowledge to do it. Like you're coming from a good grounding, but you have to transform. You don't really have a choice in this. And what would, in terms of Celtic energy, Morgan point out for you? Blue, depressed, isolated, help. I think she really wants to help you. I think she's saying that she will, if you are feeling depressed when you look at yourself, you'll be getting it wrong as well too. You could be just, Lady of Shalott was really depressed. It's like if you underestimate yourself, if you are too harsh on yourself, then you're not going to get to the truth either. I think she's really saying, I'm here for you. Like I think you've got a really strong ally in Morgan Le Fay, actually. And that connection to make sure that you take things through to what you really could be. You don't get too hard on yourself, because this can be what happens. Some people do shadow work and that's all they see then is shadows. We all have shadows, but we all also have the light. So I think she would help you with that. Okay, let's see what stars guide you as well, pile 3. Aquarius. So this is a little bit transpersonal. You might have to be a little bit sort of like detached intellectually around this to really see what the truth is and to see what you could be. It's also a bigger picture thing. I always think Aquarius is a bigger picture, future focused energy. And you have Pluto, you're transformative, powerful. You can't avoid this. You can't avoid the amount of transformation that's going to occur that you have to then be able to move forward to the next level. You can't avoid your own power either, so you've got to get to know it. And Mercury, you are able to communicate. You'll be able to find it. There's a lot of mind energy here. There's a lot of understanding it on a kind of like a mental level that will certainly help you, and probably through communication help you to bring the balance that you need. Okay, this is probably the most challenging of the 3 in many ways, but it's also got enormous potential. Let's see what the ultimate blessing is for you to close out the reading. Wow, a blessing for peace of mind, and you're going to need it. But that's there. You can, and I think ultimately the thing is that if we are trying to hold on to an illusion, it takes a lot more mental energy and emotional energy to do that. So I just feel like there's something you complete, you achieve, and you actually do it, and you do have the skills. There's nothing to say that's wrong, but it's not going to either last as a foundation, or it's going to limit you too much. But to go to the next level, you have to be really honest with yourself about what your skills are, what you want to learn, who you want to be, what the morality of it is, all of that kind of thing. But when you do that, when you're honest with yourself, you get a peace of mind that allows you to move forward and quicker. And that allows you to claim your power. I always say with self-actualization, it's not becoming some wunderkind. It's not suddenly being, the best ever of something. It's knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and being comfortable with both of them, because we all have that. Once you know that, you can move forward much more strongly because you're clear in yourself and you're not that worried about what other people think, because you know who you are. So I think there's a big thing here for you around that, and it will ultimately bring peace of mind, and it will ultimately bring you a lot of power, I think. But there's a whole new transformation coming up. You can't avoid it, but if you jump into it, you take the support of Merlin and Morgan here and connecting with your guides, it's a really big and positive thing for you ultimately. So I hope that resonates for you. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. If you care to share in the comments, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings.